You lost?" The words hit before he meant to say them. His rifle was half lowered, not aimed, not safe, just hanging there like his arm forgot what it was for. The woman did not stop sweeping. Straw bristles dragged across the porch boards, slow and steady, like she had all day. She was big with child, dress stretched tight, one hand on the broom, the other resting low on her belly. She looked up at him once. No, he felt his jaw lock. "You trespassing." The broom kept moving. "Then arrest me." He took a step closer without thinking. "You don't want me doing that." She glanced at the rifle, then back to the dirt she was pushing away. "You don't want me stopping." The word sat between them, heavy and plain. He had not heard another voice on this porch in years. The sound of it made his ears ring. He watched the broom move around a black mark burned deep into the wood, the shape of a boot heel pressed there long ago. She curved around it like she knew it was there, like she knew it mattered. "Don't touch that," he said. She paused, then lifted the broom and set it down past the mark. "I didn't." He swallowed. "How'd you get here?" She shrugged. "Same way everyone leaves." He snorted once, sharp. "You alone?" She smiled, small. "Not exactly." She moved closer to the edge of the porch, sweeping dirt off like she was clearing a table. He noticed her shoes were worn thin, toes split, feet steady anyway. "You hungry?" he asked, hating that it slipped out. "Later." "You bleeding?" He nodded at her dress. "Not yet." The calm in her voice made him uneasy. "You planning on staying?" She leaned on the broom. "Until I don't." He shook his head. "This place eats people. Only if they let it." He felt the old anger rise, the one that kept him alive. "You don't know this land." She tapped the porch board with the broom handle. "It knows me." The wind pushed dust against the fence. He shifted his grip on the rifle. "You shouldn't be on this land." She leaned the broom against the post like it belonged. "You shouldn't leave it like this." His eyes narrowed. "You telling me how to live?" She met his stare, calm as water. "I'm telling you it remembers." That word hit wrong. He felt it in his chest. "What's your name?" he asked. She shook her head. "You first." He hesitated, then said it. The name tasted old. Her mouth curved, just enough. "I know." His hand tightened. "You don't." She stepped closer, slow, careful with her weight. "Your mother used to stand right there," she said, nodding at the door, "and tell you to wipe your boots." His breath caught hard. "You don't say her name." "I didn't." Silence stretched thin. He could hear the barn door creak in the distance. "Who sent you?" he asked. She picked the broom back up. "No one." "You running from something." "Aren't we all?" He laughed once, bitter. "This isn't a shelter." She swept again, bristles whispering. "Didn't ask it to be." He glanced at her belly despite himself. "You pregnant?" "Still." "You planning on dropping that child on my porch?" She stopped sweeping and looked straight at him. "I plan on surviving." The way she said it made his throat go dry. He felt the old rules bending, the ones he built alone. No guests. No names. No debts. She broke all three just by standing there. He told himself to speak louder, to order her gone, to raise the rifle again. Instead he stayed quiet. Silence had always been his weapon. It felt dull now. The porch creaked under both of them, like it was listening too. Waiting for truth. He lowered the rifle the rest of the way. Not trust. Just tired. "You eat," he said. "There's bread." She nodded like she already knew. "I swept first." He watched her move, the calm, the certainty, the way she stood like she had nowhere else to be. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, voice low, warning and plea tangled together. She set the broom down, turned, and looked at him full on. Neither should you. The smell of frying bacon drifted across the porch as the first visitors in years arrived without warning. He froze halfway to the stove, spatula in hand. A car door slammed in the distance, gravel crunching under heavy boots. The sheriff walked up the porch steps, hat low, eyes sharp, teeth set in a slow grin that never reached them. He stopped a few feet away from the woman, examining her the way one inspects livestock, but slower, careful. His gaze lingered on her belly longer than it should have, and the man inside the house felt every second like fire on his skin. "Didn't know you were hosting," the sheriff said, voice smooth, polite enough that it could have been friendly. "I'm not," the woman replied, broom leaning against her side. "Funny. Looks like family." "She's passing through," the man said, stepping slightly between them. "No one ever just passes through here," the sheriff said, tilting his head. He glanced at the porch boards, at the burned boot mark, then back at her. "You alone?" He didn't wait for an answer. "You've had reports. Women disappearing. Some near this land." He didn't lower his voice, but the way he spoke made the air tighten. She said nothing. She adjusted her stance, one hand on the railing, the other brushing at the broom. Then, softly, clearly, almost lazily, she said, "You still burning letters?" The words cut sharper than the rifle that rested near the barn wall. The sheriff stiffened, eyes narrowing like he had been caught in a lie that refused to stay buried. The mountain man took a step back, feeling the ground tilt beneath him. She did not flinch. She did not blink. She simply waited. What are you talking about?" the sheriff finally demanded, voice rising. "You know what I mean," she said, calmly. "The letters, the ones from your desk." His jaw tightened. "That's administrative." She leaned a little forward, shoulders squared, eyes like a knife edge. "Administrative doesn't make it right." He looked away for a fraction of a second. "You can't." "I can," she interrupted. "I have before. I will again." His hand twitched toward his belt, toward the weight of the law he carried, and she smiled faintly. "Not sweet. Not kind. Just aware." The mountain man cleared his throat, stepping slightly between them. "Enough." The sheriff's eyes flicked to him, then back to her. "Whatever she's running from," he said, voice lowering just enough for her to hear, "it's contagious." He spat the words like they could burn through anyone foolish enough to catch them. The woman tilted her head. "I'm not contagious." The mountain man didn't respond. He only watched the tension stretch and pull the air around them tight. Breakfast burned on the stove, but no one moved toward it. She shifted slightly, hum a low undertone, brushing a piece of stray dust from her dress. "You've done this before," she said softly to the sheriff, almost like a parent correcting a child. He blinked. "This isn't." "It is," she said, cutting him off again. "You've hidden women, hidden land, hidden names. And now you want silence?" He swallowed hard, fingers curling into fists. No more," she said. "No more silence." The mountain man could feel the sheriff's hands trembling, the way his boots pressed into the boards, how the weight of years of control was cracking under a small woman's calm. He had felt it once himself, that shift between power and exposure, and he knew it well. The sheriff took a deep breath. "You can't stay here," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not the one leaving." "I run this county," he said, teeth grinding. "That doesn't mean you belong," she said, quiet now, deliberate. "You're the one scared," he snapped, voice cracking like glass. The mountain man stepped closer to her, hand brushing her elbow lightly. "She's not yours to frighten," he said. The sheriff blinked, momentarily caught. He turned slightly, caught between the old rules and this new presence that refused to bow. "I'm warning you," he said finally. "The land, the people, whatever she carries, it spreads. Don't say I didn't warn you." She looked at him square in the eyes. "I warned you first." The air hung heavy between them. The mountain man could feel the pulse of the house, of the porch, of the old fence lines that cradled secrets too deep for a badge. The sheriff, chest rising and falling, knew he had lost a little ground he had never noticed before. She adjusted her stance again, calm, unyielding, her belly rounding like the promise of a coming storm, her broom a shield against the laws he had always enforced. He stepped back, finally, letting the sheriff's shadow fall across the porch boards, letting her presence settle where it would, letting the old rhythm of control bend for the first time in years. The sheriff glared, breathing hard. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. It started with a low groan. The mountain man froze mid-step, hands resting on the worn counter. She leaned against the doorframe, eyes half closed, hand pressed to her belly. "Don't touch me," she said sharply. He hesitated. "You're bleeding." She shook her head. "I said don't. I'm not leaving," he said, voice tight, raw. The kitchen smelled of old wood and iron. Shadows stretched across the walls like reaching fingers. She stumbled toward the center of the room, pain folding over her in waves. "Where are the towels?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. He pointed to the shelf above the sink. "Over there." She grabbed them, pressing one to her belly. He wanted to steady her, but she pushed his hand away gently, firmly. "You have to help," he said. She let him hold the other end of the towel, guiding it herself. "Name him," she whispered, almost under her breath. He looked at her, unsure if she meant the child, the father, or the land that had watched this happen countless times before. She shook her head, gripping the edge of the counter. Not out loud. The air was thick with sweat and dust. He moved between stove and sink, grabbing water, warm rags, whatever she pointed to. "Breathe," he said, repeating it like a mantra, though his own chest ached. "You're doing fine." "I'm in labor," she hissed. "Fine is not the word." She screamed then, a sound that cut through the night, through the walls, through him. He flinched, wishing for doctors he did not know, for roads he had never traveled, for hands that could fix this better than his own. "Hands," she said, voice quivering. "You need hands on me." He hesitated. She grabbed his wrist, placed it on her side. "Now." He did, awkward, careful, gripping where she allowed. Sweat ran down both their faces. The lamp flickered. He held onto her as best he could, as the pain doubled, then tripled, each wave stealing the air from the room. "Don't let go," she gasped. "I won't." Time lost sense. The wind moaned outside. The barn door rattled in the breeze. She screamed again, a short, sharp sound, and then silence for a breath. "Push," he said, more command than suggestion. She screamed louder, gasping through it, sweat and tears on her face. "I can't," she said, voice cracking. "You can," he insisted. He tried to steady her, but his hands shook. Every instinct told him to flee, to find help, but none existed. None would come. Then it came, the first small cry, sharp and wet, tearing through the air. He froze. The sound made him inhale, then hold it like a gunshot had gone off inside his chest. She collapsed into the floor, trembling, spent. He bent over her, careful, awkward, terrified, but also certain. The child was alive. That was enough. The baby cried again, a raw, urgent sound, and he tightened his hold, staring down at the small body, marveling that such life could arrive in such darkness. She leaned against him, weak, sweat-streaked, breathing heavy. "You're alive," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "So are you," she whispered. He felt the weight of the child in his arms, limbs flailing slightly, tiny fists clenched, and the enormity of it pressed on him like stone. "You've done it before?" he asked. She shook her head. "Never like this." The room smelled of blood and sweat, of wood and night. He did not care. He only held the child, listened to it, felt the pulse against his chest, and allowed the quiet to stretch around them. The lamp flickered again. Shadows moved on the walls. He shifted slightly, careful not to jostle the baby. "Name him," he said softly. She shook her head again, lips pressed tight. "Later," she whispered. He nodded. Later would come. For now, they existed in the dim light, sweat-slick and exhausted, in the small house that held too many secrets and not enough help. Outside, the wind continued to moan, and inside, life had arrived violently, painfully, and undeniably. He did not put the child down. He could not. He stayed on the floor, holding both of them, listening to each breath, waiting, watching, learning. The night stretched long, thick, and heavy, and in that silence, in that wait, he understood the small miracle he had been given. He sat on the floor, legs crossed, the newborn cradled in his arms, awkward and trembling. The baby's tiny fists clenched against his chest, soft whimpers escaping lips too small for words. He felt the weight like it might crush him, and yet it anchored him in a way nothing else had for years. She sat across from him, leaning against the doorframe, knees pulled up, watching him carefully, her eyes unreadable. "You're shaking," she said quietly. His hands tightened around the small body. "So are you," he admitted. "You can put her down," she said again, voice soft, almost coaxing. "No," he replied, abrupt. His arms tensed instinctively. The air between them was heavy, thick with sweat, with fear, with something unspoken. She shifted slightly, leaning forward, her hands brushing the floor. "You've never done this," she said, almost a statement, not a question. "No," he said. "I've held things before. Guns, horses, dead men. Never this." Her eyes softened, but not completely. "It's not a weapon," she said. "It's a life." He remembered his sister then, brief and jagged. She had been smaller, quieter, softer, always trusting him to catch her when she fell. He had failed once. The memory burned, and he pressed the baby closer, as if holding tighter could erase the past. She watched him, measuring, silent, the way someone measures a fault line before it shifts. "You're steady," she said finally. "More than I expected." The baby cried again, tiny whines that made his chest ache. He tilted the child carefully, whispering nonsense words, hums he did not know he could make. The newborn's eyes blinked open, small and round, unafraid. He laughed softly, though it was more breath than sound. "Look at you," he whispered. "Alive. Screaming. Already stronger than me." She smiled faintly. "She'll survive," she said. "If you let her." He felt the weight of that, more than the weight in his arms. To hold is to choose. Hours passed in small movements, adjustments, whispered reassurances, and gentle hums. He learned how to support her neck, cradle her spine, rock her just enough to calm the cries. Every motion was careful, deliberate, sacred. He realized he had been holding the wrong things all his life. Guns, grudges, silence, none of it mattered now. Only this, only life. She shifted again, leaning closer. "Name her," she said softly. He looked at her, then at the small face staring up at him, features small and raw and unclaimed. He thought of the land, the porch, the burned boot mark, the names buried in letters he had never opened. He thought of the sister he had failed, of the silence that had haunted him for years. He exhaled, long and slow. "Abigail," he said. "Her name is Abigail." She nodded, accepting it without a word, as if the child and the name and the promise were one and the same. The baby stirred, and he adjusted his hold again, careful not to jostle her, careful not to let the weight slip. She reached out a tiny hand, brushing against his thumb. He held it, gripping lightly, letting her fingers curl around him. "Never drop her," she said quietly. He shook his head. "I won't." The room smelled of sweat, blood, and the faint sweetness of new life. Outside, the wind shifted, shaking the porch boards, rattling the broken fence. Inside, nothing else mattered. He felt the pulse of the child against his chest, slow and steady, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe fully, without fear. She watched him still, not with judgment, not with expectation, only quiet attention, and he knew she saw everything, his mistakes, his past, his quiet strength. He stayed on the floor long after the cries faded, rocking her gently, whispering her name. Abigail. The weight of the world outside could wait. The past could wait. For now, he had a life in his arms, and that was enough. He would not drop her. Not now. Not ever. The fire smelled faintly of smoke and old paper before he even saw it. She had found the letters tucked inside a loose wallboard near the back of the house, brittle and yellowed, edges curling as if they had been waiting for her. He watched from the doorway, the baby asleep in a makeshift cradle, Abigail's small chest rising and falling under the lamplight. "You knew," she said quietly, holding a bundle of letters like a weapon. "I survived," he said, voice low, tight. Her eyes narrowed. "That's not the same." He shook his head. "It is if you're alone." She set the letters on the table, spreading them out, fingerprints smudging ink that had survived decades. Names he recognized, names he had buried, names he wished he had never touched: the sheriff, the governor, the women who had vanished quietly, the land that had swallowed secrets without complaint. "Why are you here?" he asked, stepping closer, tension coiling in his chest. She didn't answer at once, only brushed the letters lightly with her fingers, tracing lines he had tried to erase. "I came for truth," she said finally. "Not revenge." He laughed, harsh, brittle. "Truth doesn't exist here. Only what's left." She met his eyes. "Truth is all that matters." Silence fell heavy, the kind that presses on your shoulders and makes breathing uneven. She picked up one letter, unfolded it carefully. "This one," she said. "You hid it from your friends. From yourself." He shook his head. "I did what I had to." "Did you?" she asked. Her voice sharpened like glass against wood. "Or did you hide?" He opened his mouth. She cut him off. "I know why you let it burn before. I know why it never reached the right hands. I know who you protected. Who you abandoned." The fire caught a page accidentally, curling the corner. He moved to snuff it, but she stopped him, hand raised. "Let it burn," she said. "It's slow enough." Smoke spiraled, black against the lamp's yellow. "You can't just destroy it," he said. "I'm not destroying it," she replied. "I'm releasing it. Letting the truth speak." He swallowed, fists tightening. He wanted to argue, wanted to stop her, wanted to hide behind his silence like he always had. But the room was too small for that now. She had claimed it with quiet authority, with patient, steady hands. "Why?" he asked, finally, voice hoarse. "Why come here?" She glanced at him, then at Abigail asleep nearby. "Because someone has to." "Not me?" he asked. She shook her head. "You've held too much. Now you can hold this," she said, pointing at the baby with her eyes, not her hand. "Hold her, but hold the truth too." He shifted, uneasy, feeling the weight of years, the weight of mistakes, the weight of this tiny life that depended on him for more than survival. The letters burned slower, curling into shapes he could barely recognize. He saw names, deeds, sins, and the land swallowing them like it had swallowed so many before. "Do you forgive?" he asked, almost whispering. She laughed, short, bitter, not cruel. "I don't know if forgiveness exists here," she said. "But I came to witness." He swallowed again, felt the past press against his chest, thick and suffocating. "It's too late," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For the men who did this?" "For me," he admitted. Smoke stung his eyes. The fire crackled and hissed as pages collapsed inward. She reached out, brushing one letter to the flames intentionally, watching the ink curl and blacken. "It's never too late," she said. "It's never too late for them, for the land, for the living." His hands shook. He wanted to reach for her, to steady her, to stop the blaze and the truth all at once. But he didn't. She was deliberate, precise, relentless. The fire was small, contained, yet it carried years of unspoken justice in its slow, consuming way. He looked at her, saw her chest rising and falling, sweat on her brow, the faint lines of pain and determination on her face. He realized, finally, that she wasn't just a stranger. She was the reckoning. And he was too late to stop her, too old, too bound by what he had let go, to hide anything now. "It's the right thing," she said, voice soft, almost a whisper. He nodded slowly. The fire ate the letters, smoke curling upward, black against the lamplight. Outside, the wind moaned across the dry fields, shaking the boards, rattling the fence. Inside, the house held truth, ashes, and quiet victory. The wind shifted across the valley, carrying the smell of smoke and burnt paper from the letters she had burned the night before. The mountain man stood on the porch, arms crossed, staring at the horizon where the hills met the sky. Abigail slept quietly in the makeshift crib near the wall. The calm did not last. Gravel crunched loudly in the distance, boots heavy on the dry earth. The sheriff had returned, this time with 2 deputies, rifles slung loosely across their shoulders, faces hard, expressions unreadable. "You hiding her?" the sheriff demanded before even stepping onto the porch. "She's not hiding," the mountain man said evenly, keeping his hands away from the baby. The sheriff's eyes flicked to the crib, then back to the woman standing nearby. She was leaning against the railing, arms crossed, watching. "You think that child's safe?" the sheriff asked, voice low, a threat disguised as concern. "Safer than your hands," she said, blunt, unafraid. The deputies shifted slightly, uncertain where their loyalty should fall. "You don't understand," the sheriff said, stepping closer, boots scraping the porch boards. "She's in danger." "Not from me," the mountain man replied, voice calm but firm. "From you?" the sheriff asked, leaning forward. She raised her chin. "Not from me." Silence stretched, taut and brittle, only the wind moving the edges of the crib blanket. The deputies exchanged looks, glances that said more than any words could. One hand hovered near a rifle strap, unsure whether to draw or step back. The woman spoke, calm, deliberate. "You've taken from this land before," she said, eyes locked on the sheriff. "Women. Names. Justice. And now you come back like it's all forgiven?" The sheriff stiffened. "No," she said, voice rising slightly. "It's not forgiven. Not by me, not by the land, not by anyone who remembers." Her hands rested briefly on the railing, knuckles white. "You know that," she said, letting the words hang. The mountain man felt the air shift, the power tilting. He realized for the first time in years that the sheriff no longer held it all. One deputy coughed nervously, voice low. "Boss," the sheriff spun, glare sharp. "Stay out of this." She tilted her head. "Which side are you on?" The deputy hesitated, eyes flicking between the crib and the rifles. Finally, he let his badge fall from his belt, clinking softly against the boards. "I can't," he said. The other deputy tensed but stayed silent. The sheriff's jaw tightened, anger rolling beneath the surface. The mountain man stepped closer to her, careful, deliberate. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. She glanced at him, then at Abigail, then back at the sheriff. "I never do," she said. She straightened fully, stance unwavering, shoulders squared. The sheriff's fists curled. He had come expecting control. Instead, he was faced with resistance, with reckoning. With truth that refused to bow. "You've named names," the sheriff said, voice sharp, brittle. "You've shown the cracks." She didn't answer. She only let the silence speak for her. The mountain man held his ground, arms relaxed but ready, eyes on both the sheriff and the crib. Outside, the wind rattled fence posts, shook loose boards, rattled the dry well. The ranch itself seemed to lean toward her, toward the truth, choosing sides silently. The sheriff's anger boiled, but the deputies were uncertain, the land itself pressing against him like a tide. He cursed under his breath, stepping back, realizing his authority had shifted, that the mountain man and the woman together were no longer subjects to his command. "This isn't over," he spat. She smiled faintly. "It is," she said. "For now." The mountain man glanced down at Abigail, sleeping peacefully, chest rising and falling. He felt a quiet satisfaction settle in him, heavy and permanent. The sheriff paused, his face a mask of rage and calculation. He turned slowly, stepping back toward the road. The deputies followed, one leaving his rifle behind, walking with careful respect. The porch fell silent once more, except for the faint creak of the wind against the boards, the small whimper of the baby in her sleep, and the quiet, steady presence of 2 people who had claimed the ranch in ways he could not undo. The mountain man exhaled slowly, watching the last figures disappear down the gravel path. She turned to him, expression calm, unwavering. "The ranch isn't neutral," she said. "Neither are we." He nodded, letting the weight of her words sink into the boards, into the fence posts, into the dry earth beneath their feet. They both looked out at the land, quiet, waiting, and finally, at peace enough to hold a moment. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and smoke from the burned letters as the mountain man led her toward the old well at the back of the property. The dry wooden cover creaked under his hand. She stood beside him, arms folded, watching him with a patience that made his chest ache. "It's deeper than we thought," he said quietly, voice low. She didn't answer. She only leaned slightly forward, eyes scanning the darkness inside. "It remembers everything," she said softly. "Every secret. Every wrong done and left unspoken." He shivered. Memories pressed in, whispers of women gone, of letters never sent, of men who thought silence meant safety. He had buried much of it himself, or tried to. Now, he felt the weight pressing against his chest, pressing against the land. "Bodies?" he asked, voice tight, unsure if he wanted the answer. "Names," she corrected. "Bodies too, if it matters." He swallowed, gripping the edge of the well. The wind rattled loose boards, carrying a low moan across the yard, a voice of the earth itself, warning, remembering. The sheriff arrived again, faster this time, boots crunching like gunfire. His eyes widened at the sight, at the well, at her calm presence. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, stepping closer. "The well remembers," she said, voice steady, almost cruel in its simplicity. "You should too." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "I run this county," he said, voice rising. "Not anymore," she replied. The mountain man felt a shift, subtle but undeniable, the land bending toward their side, the truth heavier than any badge. "Names," she said, tilting her head at the sheriff. "I've spoken for them." He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You don't understand," he spat. "I decide." "No," she interrupted, voice sharp, unyielding. "You decide nothing now. You're the past. And the past is buried in that well, where you tried to hide it." One deputy hesitated behind him, hands near the rifle strap, eyes flicking to the well. Another finally stepped forward, voice quiet but firm. "We can't follow him this time," he said. The sheriff's face flushed, rage rising. The mountain man gripped the edge of the well, silent, listening as she recited names, quietly, deliberately. Each name a hammer striking old boards, old fences, old hearts. "Sarah Bell," she said. "Emma Ray. Lila Ford." The sheriff stiffened, mouth opening, closing. "You can't." "I can," she said. "I do." The deputies shifted, uncertain, torn between loyalty and truth. The wind pushed loose boards on the barn. Abigail whined softly in the crib. He adjusted her cover, heart hammering. Outside, the valley held its breath. The sheriff raised a hand, trembling. "You can't speak for them," he said. "I can," she replied. "And I will." She leaned closer to the well, voice low but cutting. "And I speak for the land too. For the ones buried in silence, for those forgotten." He felt the weight of the words, the undeniable truth pressing against him. The mountain man moved closer to her, feeling the balance of power finally shift. This was their land now. Their justice. The sheriff clenched his fists. "Step back," he snapped. She didn't. "Step back, or what?" he demanded. "Or I continue," she said. "I will speak until someone listens. Until the valley remembers." The deputies exchanged looks, one lowering his weapon, the other shaking his head. Outside, the wind screamed through the fence posts, rattling the broken boards, carrying voices the sheriff could no longer command. The mountain man fired once. Not at a person. Not at a threat. Just a single shot into the air, sharp and loud, echoing across the dry valley. The sound reverberated in the sheriff's chest. He froze. The deputies looked at him, uncertain. The well seemed to sigh, the air heavy with accusation and remembrance. Finally, one deputy stepped forward and cuffed the sheriff, moving slowly, deliberately, as the mountain man held Abigail close, watching. She leaned on the well's edge, calm, triumphant, speaking softly for those who could not. "It remembers," she said again. And the mountain man understood. Not just the well, not just the letters, not just the land. The valley remembered, and so did they. The porch smelled of smoke, sweat, and iron, but it was quiet now. The sheriff was gone, cuffed and led away by the deputies who had finally chosen sides, leaving the ranch and its new occupants in uneasy calm. Abigail slept in her crib, small chest rising and falling, wrapped in the blanket they had found in the barn. The mountain man moved slowly across the porch, hands raw from the night before, wiping streaks of dried blood from the boards. The woman swept beside him, broom soft against the wood, dust rising in lazy clouds, filling the spaces between their movements. "You staying?" she asked quietly, voice low, almost a question and a promise all at once. He glanced at her, then at the baby, then back at the porch. "If you are," he said finally, words rough, uncertain. She nodded, bending slightly to sweep under the crib. "I don't know how to," he said, voice catching. "Neither did I," she replied softly, brushing dust away with care. The rhythm was slow now, deliberate, sacred almost. The wind whispered against the broken fence, shaking loose boards, but inside this small circle, they were safe. He paused, leaning against the railing, breathing in and out, tasting the calm after chaos. She looked at him, sweeping under the edge of the porch, eyes soft but alert. "You think it's over?" he asked. "Over," she said. "Nothing's over until we remember. Until we keep the land from forgetting." He nodded, swallowing hard. He could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of the valley, the quiet that followed storms. "I can try," he said. She smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Milk boiled on the small stove inside. She carried it outside in a tin cup, careful not to spill, holding it like a ritual. The baby stirred, small whimpers filling the quiet. She leaned close, whispering gentle nonsense, letting the warmth of the milk calm the tiny cries. He watched, adjusting the blanket, steadying the cradle. Each motion measured, deliberate, a slow dance of care and survival. Outside, the wind shook the fence posts again, but inside, the porch held peace. He knelt beside her, helping lift the baby into her arms. "She's yours," he said softly. "She's ours," she corrected, adjusting the blanket, tucking the tiny hands inside. He stayed close, watching the baby drink, listening to the soft suckling, the faint hum of contentment. "Quiet," she whispered, voice low. He nodded. The porch held only small sounds now, the wind, the baby, their slow, careful breaths. She looked at him again, expression softening. "You've done more than survive," she said. He shook his head. "I've done what I had to. Nothing more." "No," she said firmly. "You've held life when it could have slipped. That counts for more than anything else here." He swallowed, feeling something shift in his chest, a weight lifting, a recognition. He had learned to hold more than guns, more than grudges. He had learned to hold care. They moved slowly together, sweeping, wiping, adjusting, each action a quiet acknowledgement of the night before. Dust and dried blood mingled under their hands, remnants of violence turned into ritual, into survival, into presence. The mountain man finally smiled faintly, brushing his hand across the floor, feeling the grooves of the boards beneath his fingers. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "We'll keep it clean," she said. "The land, the house, the baby. Keep it quiet enough to breathe, but loud enough to remember." The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the porch, orange and soft. Abigail stirred again, tiny cries mixing with the wind. He adjusted the blanket, holding her steady. She leaned against him, tired but calm, watching him work. "We're alive," he said finally. "For now," she whispered. Outside, the fence groaned in the wind. Inside, the porch held warmth, milk, and quiet, the fragile aftermath of survival and care. The porch was quiet now. The fire from the burned letters was gone, the sheriff locked away, and the valley held its breath. Abigail slept in the small crib the mountain man had built from broken fence boards, chest rising and falling, tiny hands twitching in dreams he could not name. He sat beside her, holding her carefully, arms steady now, fingers brushing the curve of her cheek, adjusting the blanket with care. He had held her before, raw and terrified. Now, he held her like he had learned to hold life itself. You afraid? She asked, voice soft, leaning against the railing. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Not anymore, he said. The wind rustled the boards, carrying the scent of dry earth and old smoke. Of what? She asked. Dropping her, he said. He smiled faintly, a small, uneven curve that carried years of mistakes and grief. She watched him, expression calm but sharp, understanding the weight of those words. Then don't, she said simply. He nodded, fingers tightening gently around the baby. The night stretched long, quiet, the wind carrying faint echoes of the valley's past, secrets pressed into the soil, whispers of women long gone. He rocked Abigail slightly, listening to her soft breathing. She twitched in her sleep, small murmurs escaping tiny lips. He whispered nonsense words, soft, soothing, letting them wrap around her like a shield. She stirred, eyes fluttering, and he adjusted her head gently, careful not to jostle her. She leaned closer, resting one hand on his shoulder. You've changed, she said quietly. I had to, he replied. I didn't know how, she said. Now you do. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the night and all that had come before settle into his bones. He had held life when it could have been lost. He had held truth. He had held care. The valley remembered, the land remembered, and now he remembered how to live with what he had learned. Outside, the wind rattled loose boards and dried fence posts, carrying faint sounds from the hills, but nothing came closer. The stars stretched overhead, faint and distant, cold and unyielding. Inside, the porch was warm, the boards familiar under his knees, the crib steady beneath Abigail. The woman leaned against the railing, watching the horizon, watching him, watching the baby. She did not speak, only allowed the quiet to hold them, to stretch between them, and to settle like dust over years of pain finally resting. You know, she said softly, they could come back. He looked at her, fingers brushing the baby's hand. Let them, he said. They won't. She smiled faintly, leaning back. We've held the land, she said. We've held the truth. And now we hold her. He nodded, adjusting Abigail slightly, rocking gently. The baby whined softly, stretching tiny arms, and he whispered her name again, steady, deliberate, protective. Abigail. He held her tighter, not afraid, not uncertain. The mountain man finally leaned back against the railing, letting the weight of the night rest on him. She came closer, sliding beside him, hand brushing his arm. It's ours, she said. The land, the night, the child. Everything we need to keep safe. He nodded, looking down at Abigail, small and fragile, yet alive, already strong. I won't let go, he said. She pressed her hand lightly against his, quiet affirmation. He felt her presence, steady, unwavering, and let himself relax for the first time in years. The wind softened. The stars blinked cold and distant. The boards groaned gently under their weight. Abigail's breathing slowed, deepened, steady now. He rocked her slightly, careful, deliberate, present. She nestled into him, warm, soft, complete. She was life. She was future. She was hope carved into the edges of a long broken place. They stayed like that for hours, the three of them on the porch. No music. No words. Only breath, only warmth, only quiet certainty. The mountain man tightened his hold around Abigail. She reached a tiny hand to his chest. He held it, steady. The sheriff arrived again, faster this time, boots crunching like gunfire. His eyes widened at the sight, at the well, at her calm presence. What are you doing here? He demanded, stepping closer. The well remembers, she said, voice steady, almost cruel in its simplicity. You should too. The sheriff's jaw tightened. I run this county, he said, voice rising. Not anymore, she replied. The mountain man felt a shift, subtle but undeniable, the land bending toward their side, the truth heavier than any badge. Names, she said, tilting her head at the sheriff. I've spoken for them. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. You don't understand, he spat. I decide. No, she interrupted, voice sharp, unyielding. You decide nothing now. You're the past. And the past is buried in that well, where you tried to hide it. One deputy hesitated behind him, hands near the rifle strap, eyes flicking to the well. Another finally stepped forward, voice quiet but firm. "We can't follow him this time," he said. The sheriff's face flushed, rage rising. The mountain man gripped the edge of the well, silent, listening as she recited names, quietly, deliberately. Each name a hammer striking old boards, old fences, old hearts. "Sarah Bell," she said. "Emma Ray. Lila Ford." The sheriff stiffened, mouth opening, closing. "You can't." "I can," she said. "I do." The deputies shifted, uncertain, torn between loyalty and truth. The wind pushed loose boards on the barn. Abigail whined softly in the crib. He adjusted her cover, heart hammering. Outside, the valley held its breath. The sheriff raised a hand, trembling. "You can't speak for them," he said. "I can," she replied. "And I will." She leaned closer to the well, voice low but cutting. "And I speak for the land too. For the ones buried in silence, for those forgotten." He felt the weight of the words, the undeniable truth pressing against him. The mountain man moved closer to her, feeling the balance of power finally shift. This was their land now. Their justice. The sheriff clenched his fists. "Step back," he snapped. She didn't. "Step back, or what?" he demanded. "Or I continue," she said. "I will speak until someone listens. Until the valley remembers." The deputies exchanged looks, one lowering his weapon, the other shaking his head. Outside, the wind screamed through the fence posts, rattling the broken boards, carrying voices the sheriff could no longer command. The mountain man fired once. Not at a person. Not at a threat. Just a single shot into the air, sharp and loud, echoing across the dry valley. The sound reverberated in the sheriff's chest. He froze. The deputies looked at him, uncertain. The well seemed to sigh, the air heavy with accusation and remembrance. Finally, one deputy stepped forward and cuffed the sheriff, moving slowly, deliberately, as the mountain man held Abigail close, watching. She leaned on the well's edge, calm, triumphant, speaking softly for those who could not. "It remembers," she said again. And the mountain man understood. Not just the well, not just the letters, not just the land. The valley remembered, and so did they. The porch smelled of smoke, sweat, and iron, but it was quiet now. The sheriff was gone, cuffed and led away by the deputies who had finally chosen sides, leaving the ranch and its new occupants in uneasy calm. Abigail slept in her crib, small chest rising and falling, wrapped in the blanket they had found in the barn. The mountain man moved slowly across the porch, hands raw from the night before, wiping streaks of dried blood from the boards. The woman swept beside him, broom soft against the wood, dust rising in lazy clouds, filling the spaces between their movements. "You staying?" she asked quietly, voice low, almost a question and a promise all at once. He glanced at her, then at the baby, then back at the porch. "If you are," he said finally, words rough, uncertain. She nodded, bending slightly to sweep under the crib. "I don't know how to," he said, voice catching. "Neither did I," she replied softly, brushing dust away with care. The rhythm was slow now, deliberate, sacred almost. The wind whispered against the broken fence, shaking loose boards, but inside this small circle, they were safe. He paused, leaning against the railing, breathing in and out, tasting the calm after chaos. She looked at him, sweeping under the edge of the porch, eyes soft but alert. "You think it's over?" he asked. "Over," she said. "Nothing's over until we remember. Until we keep the land from forgetting." He nodded, swallowing hard. He could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of the valley, the quiet that followed storms. "I can try," he said. She smiled faintly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Milk boiled on the small stove inside. She carried it outside in a tin cup, careful not to spill, holding it like a ritual. The baby stirred, small whimpers filling the quiet. She leaned close, whispering gentle nonsense, letting the warmth of the milk calm the tiny cries. He watched, adjusting the blanket, steadying the cradle. Each motion measured, deliberate, a slow dance of care and survival. Outside, the wind shook the fence posts again, but inside, the porch held peace. He knelt beside her, helping lift the baby into her arms. "She's yours," he said softly. "She's ours," she corrected, adjusting the blanket, tucking the tiny hands inside. He stayed close, watching the baby drink, listening to the soft suckling, the faint hum of contentment. "Quiet," she whispered, voice low. He nodded. The porch held only small sounds now, the wind, the baby, their slow, careful breaths. She looked at him again, expression softening. "You've done more than survive," she said. He shook his head. "I've done what I had to. Nothing more." "No," she said firmly. "You've held life when it could have slipped. That counts for more than anything else here." He swallowed, feeling something shift in his chest, a weight lifting, a recognition. He had learned to hold more than guns, more than grudges. He had learned to hold care. They moved slowly together, sweeping, wiping, adjusting, each action a quiet acknowledgement of the night before. Dust and dried blood mingled under their hands, remnants of violence turned into ritual, into survival, into presence. The mountain man finally smiled faintly, brushing his hand across the floor, feeling the grooves of the boards beneath his fingers. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "We'll keep it clean," she said. "The land, the house, the baby. Keep it quiet enough to breathe, but loud enough to remember."